Hello everyone, Pat Richard, your friendly neighborhood Teams MVP, here to do another product review for UCUnleashed.com. Today we're going to look at the Yealink UVC86 PTZ camera. I'm not one for doing a bunch of unboxing videos, but I'll tell you what comes included with this particular camera. One, you get the camera itself. Next, you get the VCR20 remote control. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. You get your typical quick start guide, which gets you up and running relatively quick, a USB cable, an Ethernet cable, a power cord and power adapter, some Velcro cable ties, a bracket for mounting either on top of your monitor or on a wall, an adapter that lets you use that wall mount bracket for mounting on the ceiling, and some mounting hardware for those brackets. Let's talk about the specs of this particular device. First, we have the main camera, which is what you're seeing me from right now. That is a 4K camera with a 90-degree field of view. It is an optical zoom, so a mechanical zoom camera that can support up to 30 frames per second at 4K. Below that is a digital zoom camera, also 4K, with a 120-degree field of view that is used for reframing the main camera when using some of the built-in tracking features, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. Also on the front, at the very bottom, are 6 really small holes that are part of a 6 microphone beam-forming array that is used for active speaker tracking, and so it can determine where in a room a particular person is speaking and help focus the main camera on that particular person. On the bottom of the device, nothing really special other than a typical 1/4-20 socket if you wanted to mount it on the brackets or on a tripod. I will say the camera is pretty heavy at a little over 7 pounds, so if you're going to use a tripod, use a sturdy one. There's also a little tiny thumb wheel that allows you to manually adjust the digital zoom camera. So if you do mount it up high or on the ceiling, you can adjust where it sees in the room, where it's focused. On the back of the device, we have your typical I/O ports. We have a port labeled VCH, which is an Ethernet port, primarily there to connect Yealink's MVC audio hardware, so it's part of a larger Microsoft Teams room system. Next is the 48-volt DC power input. That's where the included power supply connects. After that, we have a USB port, and that is what I'm using to connect this particular camera into my desktop computer right now, but it's also where you would connect it to connect as part of a larger MTR system. An HDMI port, which I'm very excited about, which allows you to take the output of the camera and send it to any kind of video switcher if you were doing something as part of a non-Microsoft solution and wanted to capture the great video that comes out of the camera. After that, we have a line in, a reset button, and your typical Kensington lock slot. Let's talk about some use cases for this particular camera. Now, as I mentioned, it's perfectly suited to be the main part of a Yealink MTR system, their MVC series, or as part of any third-party MTR system that is out there. It can also be used with a USB out to a desktop or laptop, like I'm using it here, for personal or small huddle space camera systems, or as an HDMI source into a different type of video system, as I mentioned. Now, there's 4 modes that this camera is capable of operating in. The first is your typical PTZ, or pan, tilt, zoom, the ability for the camera to move around and focus on different areas of the room. That is a entirely manual process of adjusting the camera using either the VCR20 remote control or through some software. The other 3 modes are all based on artificial intelligence for tracking. The first is auto framing, or the ability to frame the view to adjust for everybody that is in the room at the near end. So we've probably all been in a meeting where you see somebody at the remote end that is sitting at the far end of a long conference table. They're the only one in the room, and all you see is kind of a little speck of a person. That doesn't give you the best experience for seeing that person. So with auto framing, the lower camera, the digital zoom camera, is capable of seeing people in the room and adjusting the main camera to frame that person to give you a nice close-up view of that person or those people in the room. Now, I don't have a conference room here at home and a bunch of people to kind of demo this, but Yealink has this pretty good video which shows that, as one person is in that room, the camera will adjust, kind of pan out, figure out who's in the room, kind of zoom in and frame them accordingly. And then as more people come into that room, the camera will then adjust to compensate for more people being in the room and frame them the best that it can for the optimal picture. And it can do that as the room fills up. The next mode that this camera is capable of doing is what's called speaker framing. Now, as I mentioned previously, there is 6 holes on the front of the camera as part of the beamforming microphone array that determines where people are speaking in a room, and then adjusting the main camera to frame them so that you get that better experience. And then as the conversation moves around the room, it will move and follow that conversation accordingly. The third AI-based solution, or the third AI-based tracking method, is presenter tracking, and that's the one I like the most. And that is the ability to follow a single individual around the room and give that great experience for those on the far end. So whether it's somebody that's just kind of standing up at the front of the room and kind of moving around a little bit, or somebody that's pacing back and forth or moving all throughout the room, this camera is certainly able to follow that person, framing it so that you're not seeing more of what you don't need to see, and you are seeing a nice, good, clean close-up of that presenter. Now, back over towards my desk. Something to keep in mind is that when you're in the first mode, the PTZ mode, the remote control and the software allow you to manually adjust that camera. But once you're in one of the 3 tracking modes, those methods do not work. They're disabled, and the AI allows the camera to move around as it needs to. Let's take a look at the Yealink USB Connect software. This software is a free download for Yealink. On the first page, we have the device status, which shows you your serial number, your firmware and hardware versions, etc. Device settings tab allows you to configure various aspects of how the camera is oriented, whether it's inverted or upside down, such as a ceiling mount, whether you want to reverse the camera pan tilt or the pan buttons if it's inverted. Detect number of faces. This uses artificial intelligence to figure out how many people are in the camera view. If you turn it on, you'll notice in the upper right corner, we see the number of people that it is determined are in that frame. That can be fed back to analytics software. Lens correction, pardon the typo in the software there, that is for calibration when you first get the device and get it set up. Auto tracking, you see that it's disabled right now, which means the camera is in PTZ mode, which gives us these buttons on the underneath the view. We can adjust up, down, left, or right. We can even then save the current position as a presets and call them via either the software or the 3 buttons on the remote control. Now, if we turn on the tracking mode, auto tracking, we get the options depending on what tracking mode we're in. The first one is the auto framing, which is like your group framing, as we saw in the Yealink video a minute ago, framing all the people that are within the camera shot. And we can adjust the tracking speed between low, medium, and high. Those are the same kind of settings that we see for the speaker tracking as well, for determining the active speaker. The last is the tracking, the auto tracking, which does presenter tracking. And we see that we can adjust kind of the target area of where we want it to focus and what we want it to look for within that software. On the image setting tab, we have the ability to adjust camera qualities such as your exposure, your saturation, and your sharpness. Update device tab, this gets us the ability to update the firmware. It'll go out to the Yealink site and check and see if it's available. Device support allows us to gather some log files, send them to Yealink or anybody via email, as well as adjust the various audio qualities, testing the microphone, etc., turning on the de-reverb, offering feedback to Yealink, as well as rebooting or restoring the device back to its original configuration. So that's it for the Yealink USB software. Now, as we've seen in this video, as well as the Yealink video that I included here, the 4 various modes that the camera can operate allow you to configure it for the best experience within your environment. I've used it connected to my Teams client for a lot of meetings over the past couple of months, and I've received some great feedback from attendees in those meetings. The presenter tracking feature is still my favorite of everything built into this camera. I don't have to worry about moving around, moving out of the frame, or having a view so wide as to lose detail or closeness for meeting attendees. Now, I'm going to include some additional information in the description below, including that Yealink video, some spec sheets, and links to more information about this great device. Thanks for watching. I appreciate any feedback that you can provide about this review, and I look forward to future product reviews here for ucunleashed.com.